Website caching with WordPress doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be super simple and super effective for full site caching. Today we are talking about website caching in WordPress. Yes. Which part of caching are we talking about, Dominic?
So what is caching?
What is caching? We always start with what is.
What is?
And you explain it. And then we're done after 3 minutes and just jump into much more deep dive.
Yes.
Okay, Dominic, what is caching?
Wow, caching. I guess there are like tons of different aspects to caching, right? So different types of caching. But caching is basically a technique to speed up loading of your site, right? That's like the easiest thing that you can say. And then when we look from the outside in, basically the most basic form of one form of caching, let's put it that way, is page caching, right? Like HTML caching. That means that you cache the entire HTML of a website that somebody visits, and so that the request doesn't go to the backend or like to PHP, but that you serve directly the HTML that was rendered when somebody else visited or was even pre-rendered. And this can be done with multiple things, right? There are tools, and when you use Nginx, for example, there's some functionality included that you can already cache these HTML documents in a normal WordPress. There are tons of plugins that do cache or page caching on file system level, right? So that they save an HTML file to the disk, and when a request comes in that for a specific URL, and this has been cached already, that they just read the file from disk and serve that to the user. There are other like cache or full site cache servers out there, like Varnish, for example. That's something that we also have used before. And this is will have the most impact basically for visitors to your site, right? And like from that, sometimes it's not possible to cache things. Then you have to go a little bit deeper, and you do like template caching. This is also known as like Russian doll or onion caching, right? Where you have different layers of your website, like that. And you always have like a invalidation token or something like that, so that you only re-render a part of your site if the data that you put in to render this template or part has actually changed. And this is all like the basically the visible caching or HTML caching. And then another really important part of caching is object caching. And this is like WordPress has really over the years improved this really a lot. They have their own caching helpers, right? Like WP cache get and set and delete and whatsoever. And by default, this only works for one request. So whenever let's say you get an option from the WordPress backend, right? And you need to get this option multiple times during one single request, then this database read will only be executed once, because all of these getters for options and for metadata and posts and so and whatnot are wrapped inside the WP cache functions, right? So, but of course, persisting that only for one request has downsides, because like you cannot use it for other requests, right? So, and this is where then why you have in WordPress this like these pluggable object cache backends, so to say, and like the most widely used ones are, I guess, Memcache and Redis now. Redis replacing Memcache as the go-to object cache. But there are also other adapters for like also file cache, like a file-based object cache or in-memory object cache or whatever, right? So this is then caching on an object database level. Yeah, I'm not stopping.
Yeah. Okay. Another.
And I think the last piece that comes into my mind is like opcache, like and this sometimes confuses people, right? Because object caching and opcache, whereas opcache is just like a PHP, like, and now I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it's basically the not the compiled, but the interpreted, like the bytecode that the PHP files generate is then saved in memory of the PHP process, right? So that means when you change when you have opcache running with a specific configuration and you change a PHP file and you reload your page, you will actually not see these changes that you made to the PHP file because opcache caches the PHP files in their bytecode representation, right? And so this needs to be then regenerated when you change something. Yeah. And I guess these are like basically 3 big types of caching that is used in WordPress.
Full site caching?
Yeah, or page, like HTML caching, view caching. And this under that for full page caching and like this template caching.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Then what was the second?
Object caching.
Object caching.
And opcache.
Opcache. And additionally, we could touch on caching assets and stuff like that. That's what many people, I think, first think about when it comes to caching. Oh yeah, my browser cache. I got to clear my browser cache, right? Is that no? That not necessarily can be related to that. So when you're caching images in a local browser or assets like CSS or JavaScript.
Yes.
So yeah, there are multiple things like that go into the topic of caching. I always like to think about or approach things in a Pareto principle way. What gives me like 80-20? What gives me the biggest impact with low effort? What if I want to achieve 80% with 20% input? Which way is the right way to go? What would you focus on?
Well, as I said initially, I think like the most impact for your site's visitors is page caching, like full page caching, because actually only the first person who visits a page waits till it gets generated by WordPress or by your server, right? And from that point on, like it's all really fast. And if you want to speed up backend performance, like this is, for example, or this is an example where page caching, full page caching doesn't really work, right? Because you don't want to, because the content in your WP admin always changes or always needs to change. And for that, object cache, like a good object cache is gives you basically the most bang for the buck. So
object cache, you need object cache whenever you have a dynamic websites where every request needs to hit the server, right? Like a shop, not every part of the shop, but for getting, for example, the available stock and stuff like that. The actual information right now. But the more static, like kind of the content that you generate is, that you publish is, the easier it is to just use static page caching, HTML page caching. So this is typically true for blogs, right? Or landing pages. That content doesn't change by itself usually. It only you need to update it or save it, publish it, and then you can cache it from there on, basically forever, until someone else or you again want to update the content. However, there might be other cases like when you have dynamic elements on the page. Like on a blog post, you might have at the bottom the section related blog posts. And these should maybe show the news blog posts or change on every request. Then you need to exclude this from caching. And that's where it gets like kind of a bit more complicated already. But personally, I'm a huge fan of just like the simplest form of caching. And there are plugins out there which you can activate, and they will just like indefinitely cache everything that you save, that you publish, until you manually expire it by updating a post or a page again, or by clicking a clear cache option. And I personally, I prefer these. What's that plugin actually that's in our whitelist?
Cache enabler.
Oh yeah, Cache Enabler, that's it. Cache Enabler. I personally like that because I think one of the most common, most popular cache plugins for WordPress is, what's it called? WP Cache Pro, no, what was the name?
Supercache.
Supercache.
WP Supercache.
WP Supercache, yeah.
Yeah, it's by Automatic, right?
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Was it always by Automatic? Or did they
I think so. Let me check.
purchase it?
No, I'm pretty certain that this...
Okay, and Cache Enabler is by KeyCDN, but I think they purchased it.
They purchased that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, however, like I noticed just like with WP Supercache, this is like a much more advanced plugin, which has many options, and specifically like options to exclude certain pages from caching and to automatically expire the cache after a certain time, and additional cache options like or minifying JavaScript and caching assets and updating your htaccess or whatsoever. And I have more times seen that configured in a not wrong way, but not optimal way, and things not being cache optimized. And additionally, it took a lot of time to set that up, even for someone who has done that a couple of times. So I said I want to default back to a very simple solution. And that's for me what Cache Enabler does. They also, by the time I think now, they added some more features. In the beginning, it was just like activate cache, and that's it. All you could do, and you could just say maybe invalidate all the cache after 30 days or something like that. That then again the pages would be refreshed. But by default, I really like this very strong and hard caching.
Yes.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you can basically think of these plugins as static site generators, right? So while it's actually getting really popular now as well to use WordPress as like a headless CMS and then generate static files that you deploy to a static server, because this gives you a lot of security and also page speed and so on, right? But these full page caches are actually a dynamic way to generate a static site. And that's why, as you said, like it's really nice to have something super easy, right? Because what you want to do is when somebody requests the page, you want a version of the HTML that's get generated to be saved in an HTML file. And from then on, this should be served as your request, right? And while...
I guess the way it works usually always then is like it like reads the plugin probably reads the output from whenever the page gets generated, like ob start, ob end, just fetches whatever is served to the client, and then saves that as static HTML to a page. And then that's like as if you created that HTML and just served it from the server.
Yeah. And then there's like one way, for example, this Cache Enabler plugin. When you have created this HTML site, right, and the request comes in, the request still goes to your index PHP and goes through WordPress, But at a really early point in time, like before anything gets executed, it checks, okay, is there a file, right? And there's another way to like optimize that is by adding some specific htaccess rules or like server configuration. It's also possible with Nginx to not go through PHP if this file exists, right? And this will then be actually even more like real static, serving a really static site because it doesn't have to go through the PHP.
And that's what I would usually prefer. I think my favorite way, like when in the htaccess file, if it's an Apache server, you could just like add this rule, which first checks if whenever a request is coming in, if there's an actual file with that name on the server. And if it is, it serves that. So nothing else, like the server has basically nothing to do besides serving that HTML file. Yeah, that's super effective. And then basically the plugin, the WordPress instance, just like has to make sure to maintain that HTML file and delete it, maybe. And when it's not there, then the full request gets to the server and a new page is generated. Yeah, I think website caching with WordPress doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be super simple and super effective for full site caching.
Totally.
And yeah, I'm still wondering sometimes why there are so complicated caching plugins out there. Well, they have a lot of options, a lot of reasons to configure, but it just tends to be so complicated. And the more complicated it is, the more functionalities there are, I feel the more error prone, or not error prone, like the more errors can be coming up.
Yeah, I mean, look at one of the most popular free caching plugins used to be W3 Total Cache, right? So and this actually, when you install this plugin, you see where the problem lies because there are so many options. There's so much that you can configure. We talked about three types or four types of caching, and you can configure all of them in there, and even like some more stuff, right? So this is really, it gets complicated really fast if you want to solve everything. But as you said, like, we always like tools that have like do a specific job and do one job well, right? Do one thing well, like also the Unix philosophy and so on. But like in general, you have to think about, okay, and you brought up the browser cache, right? Mm-hmm. And because I remember in the past, or when I started with developing websites, it was a lot of the times where it was like, yeah, why doesn't it show up? Or the client sees something different. Why is that? Oh yeah, clear your cache, and you'll see the updated version, right? And since just a point in time when we changed something about how we approach things, this hasn't been an issue at all anymore, right? Mm. And this is because we use, like, for our dynamically generated pages, or also for these static pages, we actually don't set any cache headers, or we say like a max age of 0, right? So that every time you request the HTML of a server, we always give you the new version. Like, this should never be cached in the browser. And for everything else, actually, or for most, let's put it like that, for most static files, we have actually an indefinite caching, right? Yeah. Or at least 1 year. Because through our build process, we give, like, there used to be like or in WordPress you can also do it, the cache busting via the WP enqueue script and so on, the version number, right? Mm-hmm. So you append the version number of a file, but this then is just done for like JavaScript and CSS files. But we basically do that for all of our assets that we have in the theme. So every image, every other like static file that we use gets a hash written in the file name. So not a version number appended with a query string, but actually a hash in the file name. And this way, this can like never lead to issues with browser caching, or whatever, right?
Yeah, right. That shouldn't be the case when you have like it's showing the wrong image, kind of, or an outdated image, but should always load the latest version. Unless if it's like in a content image uploaded by WordPress, because those images don't get revision, don't get a version. But also WordPress manages that if you update a new upload a new version. However, there's a plugin. I think sometimes we use that as well, where you can replace
media.
Yeah. What's the name again?
Yeah, replace media files.
WP replace media or something like that. And so you can replace one file, and it does have an option which says keep the same file name.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't do that.
You should never do that. No.
Right, because you as a developer or as a content editor, you try that, and then it's like, oh, it doesn't show a new version. And it's like, oh yeah, right, I need to clear my cache, and then, oh yeah, it works now. And it's like, yeah, right, it works for you, but for no one else. No one else sees that, right? So you should always rather upload new versions to not have these cache problems, because indefinitely caching everything is kind of the best. The best approach or the most effective one.
And like the thing is, I just said we never use or all the pages like or the browser cache for HTML that's generated is set to max H0, right? So no cache, no browser caching at all. And there are exceptions to that, of course, and also for dynamic sites where we say like these should never be cached, right? Or maybe there's some dynamic content on a page that cannot be cached and so on. And in these cases, however, if you have a really high traffic website, there's something called, I think micro caching is like the term for that, where you say I cache something for just a couple of seconds. So even a dynamic page can be cached for like maybe 2 seconds, because if you have an ad on TV or something, and you have, let's say you have an ad during Super Bowl, and then 10 million people go on your page for like at the same time, then it will take like so much load of your server if you just do micro caching, right? Which would otherwise never be used, but in this case just cache something for like 2 seconds or something, a dynamic page.
Yeah.
So that's actually something that
It's super interesting. I think we didn't need that, or maybe we needed that, or at some point we did something like that for a large German car brand. Probably guessed the name already. We did this campaign, and it was also a WordPress website, and it was like TV ad airing the night before Christmas Eve on 7, I think, German TV stations at the same time for 2 to 3 minutes, something like that. And the goal was to go to that website. And we created that website with WordPress, but then we generated a static version. Kind of, we had to use some kind of plugin that generated a static version to serve that, because we didn't want to risk at all any dynamic requests going to the website. I think we put that even on a CDN, something like that. But overall, I think what when it comes down to like my advice to doing good caching in WordPress, I want to follow up on what you said. Like we like to use plugins and solutions that do one thing and do that really good. I think there's a valid point in having many plugins that do a lot of things, and it just like, I think probably the goal of most of those plugins is just like, we want to give people something not to worry about. Just activate it, hit some options, and it'll do everything for you. And I just looked it up in the WordPress.org directory to also maybe to make a little promo for lesser known plugins. There's one called WP Fastest Cache with active installations on more than 1 million websites. And it has a lot of stuff. What's written in the features? Features mod rewrite. All cache files are deleted when a page or post is published. Admin can delete. Okay. Block cache, cache timeout. Enable, disable cache option for mobile devices for logged-in users, SSL support, CDN support, Cloudflare support, preload caching, WP CLI cache clearing, excluding pages and user agents, and then additionally CSS minification, HTML minification, gzip compression, combining CSS, combining JavaScript, removing emojis, widget caching. Gosh, this is like converting WebP images, database cleanup, Google Fonts async, lazy loading, deferring JavaScript. Yeah, that's 100 different things bundled into one. I think it's not even valid at this point to say it's a caching plugin. It's an optimization plugin, which can handle a lot of things. And that might be great. But to do that really well, probably you might need to dig into all these things, what they do and how they work, and if they break something or if they don't. And I just really like using something more simple and it's really suited for the job.
Yeah, I think this is like it's really tough sometimes, right? Because in theory, I would also prefer something where I don't have to look for many plugins, see if they actually work with each other, but I would just install like one plugin and then you're good to go, right? And then you have all these options. But from experience, these all-in-one plugins, they usually are like it's just too complex, and the features aren't implemented as well as like other simpler solutions, right? So like for a long time, the only two plugins that we used for optimizing our website were actually Cache Enabler and Auto-Optimize, right? So Auto-Optimize is basically a plugin. You can also call it a caching plugin, right? Because it concatenates or can optimize like your asset files, JavaScript, CSS, and fonts, and what else?
That's not strictly caching functionality, but optimization.
But the caching functionality, it combines them to one and then caches this file, this one file on the server, so that it only has to be generated once, right? So, and we were really like, this solved most of our issues, right? Or this helped us with a lot of points for performance optimization. Now we also use some paid plugins from time to time, but these a lot of the times also have like additional services, right? Or they use like infrastructure. Like one of the biggest things is like a critical CSS, right? Where you can generate a critical CSS automatically for your pages, but this always involves an external server making a request to your website and then saving the result, like analyzing this page, saving the result of what's critical to like an extra file, and then this is being inlined and the rest of the CSS is loaded differently, right? But again, how do you know that the service is doing this in a good way? Because what do you optimize for? Like, I've never probably seen a service that offers critical CSS for multiple devices, right? Because or for different viewport sizes, because a mobile browser might need a critical a different critical CSS file than a desktop.
But this is like with the WP Rocket, which we're using on this plugin, which we're using on a couple of pages, where we also noticed it broke websites. Like literally broke functionality because of this automatic above the fold optimization. It couldn't detect correctly which assets JavaScript sometimes and CSS was needed, and then things were displayed in a wrong way. And it also helped us in many other cases. But at some point, I think specifically, they had on their website very aggressive marketing. And I think I got an email from a client that just said, why don't you just install the plugin? It solves all your problems, basically. And that's what kind of their marketing. Their marketing was more aggressive. I don't remember the exact words, but it was in the direction of, don't worry about anything, just install it and everything will be perfect, kind of. And that was like, okay, there is no way this is going to happen because this is not how technology works. And I had to explain to them that the claims that they made were more aggressive marketing than the simple truth of just install it, activate it, trust it, and everything is good. No, we had to deactivate some functionality because it didn't work out. You could, of course, see and try to figure out why was that. What maybe it was due to the way we develop things, or the way to because of other plugins that were used, or I don't know, but who wants to spend the time and money again to figure that out? And there's a very good market for these kind of things and plugins, but I remain just at least skeptical of too aggressive marketing claims that you install something and it solves all your problems. I think understanding things is still very important to do the right thing also, because you can also do counterproductive things.
Yeah. Maybe to circle back.
Yes.
Like this, the caching is one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, a lot of these plugins market themselves as like caching plugins, but as you said, this has nothing to do with caching anymore, but it's like website optimization, speed optimization. And we in the past have used a lot of the times we look at what is actually like, what do we want to cache? What can we cache?
Yeah.
And then look for a plugin that does just that, right? One for just the object cache, one for just the page cache. And then also look at, okay, what does it mean the page is cached? So the HTML is static. So if we actually don't want to exclude pages that are dynamic from this static cache, then we have to think about, okay, is there a way we can implement the functionality the page needs via Ajax, like loading it asynchronously after the static side has been loaded and so on, right? So yeah, and that's why like knowing all the aspects and knowing the parts and the definitions for certain things is always like really helpful.
Yeah.
Right?
And getting the basis right. And getting the basis right of whatever you do. I'm looking currently at the WP Rocket website. Their claim is the #1 WordPress caching plugin. Funny that you said it. So yeah. And then it goes on like all-in-one web performance plugin. I think that's more accurate. Of course, the others maybe easier to get from a marketing point of view. But yeah, it's not caching. It's more about overall optimization. But I always like to approach things in a way that don't just throw a plugin at something, but get the basis right, get good performance at core level, make good decisions, understand the architecture. And then typically you can get to like 90, above 90 page speed score, and then you can still add a page caching plugin and an optimization plugin and solutions and configure things to get even better. And the impact will be much, much better and much more controllable for you.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked about CDNs.
We haven't even talked about CDNs.
But we are not going to.
No. Yeah. We'll follow up with that one.